Jak and Daxter. What was once thought to be Naughty Dog's pride and joy has seemingly become Sony's forgotten stepchild. And I unfortunately come with not one, but two Jak and Daxter pitches that both have been canned. Let's talk about it. Whoa! What's up, guys? Canadian Guy here, and I am back from my PAX East trip, and it was an absolute blast in Boston, and I loved every second of it. I'll be making a few videos going over some of the games that I played and how the trip overall went, but while I was on my trip, a huge development on the Jak and Daxter side of things came out of the blue, and it's a development that really stinks. Jak and Daxter is a franchise that is primed for a comeback. It's ready to exploit the wallets of all the adults who played it in the early 2000s to be able to feel like a kid playing once again on the PlayStation 2. I would know because I'm adults. I also say that the franchise is primed for a comeback because we've basically been in a remake and remaster boom, with Crash Bandicoot essentially starting the trend. Classic titles of all scales, sizes, tones, budgets have been coming back from well-beloved titles. Whether it's AAA like Halo or Spyro, to smaller games like Pac-Man and even Klonoa, even Bubsy, Bubsy of all characters is making a comeback with a brand new 3D platformer, a brand new sequel. And nearly every single one of these titles that have come out have been massively successful and overall has been a gold mine because remakes and remasters typically cost less to develop than a regular AAA game. Even Nintendo, who just absolutely loves to start trends and will begrudgingly hate to follow any of them, has followed in the footsteps with remakes and remasters for their titles as well, done in the same style. Now, Jak and Daxter, on average, in comparison to a lot of these other platformers that have been getting new titles, sits above average, with the exception, of course, of games like Mario, Crash, and maybe Spyro. He might be on par with Spyro. I'm not sure. That's for subjectivity. But Sony, for some reason, has just not jumped on the opportunity to actually bring Jak back in any meaningful way. Naughty Dog, for example, has actually been on record in stating that they do not have any desire to return to the Jak and Daxter series anytime soon, which actually is fine. A lot of the popular IP that has been brought back today isn't even made by the original creators. But it also seems that Sony has no interest in bringing Jak back either. Sure, if you were to ask them directly, hey, would you guys be open to see a remake or a comeback of Jak and Daxter? They would give you a big toothy grin and tell you, yes, of course, we would love to see Jak come back. But their actions are speaking a lot louder than their words. In fact, their actions are literally screaming. First of all, Sony has actually shut down a studio that was the perfect candidate to make a brand new Jak and Daxter remake, Blue Point Games. In fact, their last 7 titles, 7, that they led development on were remakes and remasters for the PlayStation brand, with the last 2 games being the Shadow of Colossus and Demon's Souls being full-scale, essentially one-to-one remakes done in the style of Insane Trilogy. And Sony just shut them down. During that shutdown, stories began to circulate about its reasoning for it being shut down. Now, the facts here, I will tentatively say, begin to get murky, and the current narrative is a little bit shifty. However, apparently, the current narrative is that Blue Point was making a multiplayer God of War game. Yeah, I don't know why either. And apparently it wasn't working, to the shock of absolutely no one. So the studio, Bluepoint, tried pitching other titles to PlayStation to try to get those put into development, and those were all shut down. And eventually, the studio was just promptly canned. And one of those pitches, allegedly, was for a Jak and Daxter remaster or remake, to which Sony promptly said no. And want to know the bad news? That's not the news that broke while I was at PAX East. Recently, another studio was sadly shut down, Sanzaru Games. Now, in this circle and on this channel, they were most known for working on Sly Cooper 4 Thieves in Time, and also being the devs of the third game for Spyro's Reignited trilogy. They were bought by Meta, started working on VR games, and because Meta made a very stupid gamble thinking that VR was gonna be not an accessory, but the future of gaming. Well, as you can tell, that didn't really work out, and they turned around and shut down the very studios that they acquired to make said VR games. Yeah, shutting down the studios that actually make your games is like putting an additional hole in your ship when it's already sinking. Now, unfortunately, again, the studio was shut down, but one of its workers, Travis Howe, took to LinkedIn and posted a bombshell of a video, a side-by-side scene of a completely revamped cinematic from Jak and Daxter, the precursor legacy.
Man, that stung! I told you we shouldn't have come here, and you listened! What? Okay. I'm fine.
Now, of course, this set the internet ablaze. Travis further explained, though, that Sanzaru in the past had assembled a team to try and pitch a remaster of Jak and Daxter to Sony. The team came together, made this cinematic, and pitched it. And to be clear, so that everybody knows, Sony did not have any involvement with the creation of this. It was simply a pitch to try to get their permission to make a Jak and Daxter remaster. Sony's answer? Can you guess? I think you can guess. They said no. I don't get it. Look, can I speak candidly for a moment? Will you spare a Canadian guy to just rant? Because there's a few words I gotta say, and I gotta go a little bit off script here. Jak and Daxter literally has the DNA of Crash Bandicoot, one of the most successful 3D platformers outside of Nintendo in the history of all games. And Jak and Daxter is essentially has most of that in its DNA. And Crash Bandicoot sold over 20 million units as of 2024. And Sony even helped get it made in the first place. And not only that, its sister title, Spyro Reignited, sold over 10 million units. These games are literally printing money. And the thing is that Sony looks at these and says, hey, this is a really good idea. We should start bringing back IP that we once had that was popular and within the same niche and remake it. And so do you know what they do? You know what Sony does? They turn around and they make Medieval. Now listen, I don't want to put a slant on Medieval. I liked Medieval. I liked the remake as well. I thoroughly enjoyed it. But if you were to look at that franchise through an objective commercial lens, it's not an ideal test candidate to see if this plan would work. Okay, there's no way you can sit there and say Crash, Spyro, Medieval, yeah, potato. No, that doesn't work. That's not objectively true. I'm sorry. Crash Bandicoot, the first game, sold like almost like 7 million copies. Spyro sold 5 million. Medieval sold around an estimate of 700,000. What? That's not comparatively close to the same. Why are you using a testing stick on a game that is good but is niche? And not just a little niche, it is super niche. And then let's look at Jak and Daxter. it has allegedly, estimatedly, has sold around 4 million units. You can compare that to Crash and Spyro. You can compare and be like, hey, we can extrapolate success because of the success of these other two titles. How can you sit there and decide to pick Medieval over Jak and Daxter, or Sly Cooper, or any of the other treasure trove of IP that you're currently sitting on, and you decide to test it with Sir Daniel Fortescue? Again, no slant to those games. Those games are fun. If you haven't played them, you should play them. But as a commercial measuring stick, not a good choice. To layer on top of this garbage sandwich, the garbage with the trash, Sony, your marketing for that game was awful. It was terrible. It was horrible. It was awful. It was bad. So bad. We saw like one trailer and then another trailer, then heard nothing for a whole year, and then it was like the last few months they started to amp up, and then it was like the last week they started to actually acknowledge that the game exists in the first place. The marketing for the game was awful. And then when the remake came out, we actually found through a leak that they actually sold around 500,000 copies for the PS4 remake. Now listen, that is honestly not too bad, but it's clearly not enough. And then Sony is just like, that didn't work. I guess we must just blah, 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 blah. And I don't get it. I don't get it. And I don't understand why that Medieval of all titles was used as the measuring stick. Now, to calm myself down, because I get fired up about this stuff. This stuff, I'm genuinely passionate about this stuff, and it genuinely fires me up. I still shockingly have a little hope, because both of these pitches seemingly were at the very least a few years old. I'm not confirming that, I'm simply guessing. And since these pitches were shut down, again, I have a tiny fire of hope. And the reason why is two reasons. One is because actually Astrobot hitting the scene and cranking it out of the park and becoming Game of the Year was just, it may have been the perfect wake-up call for Sony to realize that these style of games are valued and loved. And the second reason is because leadership has been drastically changed around the same time that Astrobot became a shining success. And who knows, maybe the leadership at some point decided, after seeing the success of Astrobot, actually decided to maybe start early development, or at least early exploration of a brand new Jak and Daxter, or maybe Sly Cooper, or again, anything else from their giant pile of legendary games. The point is, Sony, can you please treat Jak and Daxter with the respect that it deserves? Please, more than just re-releases. Can we get a new game, a reboot, a remaster, just something, because the titles are legendary and they deserve to be treated as such. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. Bye-bye.